April 2002. The phone rings in a dimly lit Seattle apartment on a rain-soaked afternoon. It rings once, twice, 3 times. The answering machine clicks on, and a concerned voice fills the silent room.
Layne, hey man, it's Mike. Just checking in. Haven't heard from you in a while. Call me back, alright?
The machine beeps. The message is saved. But no one will ever press play. This was the world Layne Staley left behind. A world that had, in many ways, already forgotten him before his heart even stopped beating. By April 2002, Alice in Chains had been dormant for years. Grunge, the movement he helped define, had faded into nostalgia. The music industry had moved on, chasing new trends, new faces. Yet behind the locked door of his University District condo, Layne remained, a ghost in his own life, slowly disappearing while the world outside kept turning. His voice, once one of the most powerful in rock music, had been silent for nearly a decade. His last live performance was in 1996. His last studio recording, a haunting contribution to the 1998 box set track Get Born Again, sounded like a man already whispering from the grave. Fans still clung to hope. Maybe, just maybe, Layne would return. Maybe he'd beat his demons, reunite with Jerry Cantrell, and bring Alice in Chains back to life. But those closest to him knew the truth. Layne wasn't coming back. The signs had been there for years.
Are you happy?
I was getting to that, yep.
His final interviews painted a portrait of a man trapped in his own despair. In a rare 1999 conversation with Guitar World, he admitted, "I know I'm dying. I'm not stupid." His lyrics had always been confessional, but now they read like obituaries written in advance. What's my drug of choice? Well, what have you got? He'd sneered on dirt, a question that became less rhetorical and more inevitable with each passing year. The phone kept ringing that April. His mother, Nancy McCallum, called repeatedly. So did his sister, Liz. Bandmates left messages. Old friends reached out, hoping for a response that would never come. On April 19th, 2 weeks after the first unanswered calls, alarmed associates contacted Seattle police. Officers forced entry into his home. What they found was a scene of heartbreaking isolation.
The lead singer of the rock band Alice in Chains has been found dead in his Seattle home.
Layne's body was discovered, slumped on a couch, a loaded syringe nearby. The medical examiner would later determine he had died on April 5th, exactly 8 years after Kurt Cobain's suicide. The official cause? A lethal mix of heroin and cocaine, a speedball combination that had claimed countless musicians before him. Perhaps the most chilling detail? He had been dead for 14 days before anyone noticed. This wasn't just the story of a rock star's downfall. It was the culmination of a decade-long unraveling that everyone saw coming, yet no one could stop. The man who once screamed, "I stay away" on MTV had, in the end, done exactly that, retreating so far into the shadows that even his death went unnoticed. The tragedy wasn't just that Layne Staley died. It was that he died alone, in a room where the only sounds were the hum of a refrigerator and the occasional ring of a telephone that would never be answered again. And the cruelest irony, the world that had once worshipped his voice didn't realize it had gone silent until it was far, far too late. Long before the multi-platinum albums, before the thunderous applause of sold-out stadiums, before the relentless grip of addiction took hold of his life, there was simply a boy, a quiet, introspective child growing up in the unassuming suburb of Kirkland, Washington. Layne Thomas Staley, born on August 22, 1967, entered the world not as the future icon of grunge, but as the son of Nancy McCollum and Philip Blair Staley. His parents divorced when he was just 7 years old, an event that would leave a lasting mark on the young boy's psyche. Kirkland in the 1970s was a far cry from the tech boom hub it would later become. It was a place of modest neighborhoods, wooded areas where kids could disappear for hours, and a sense of quietude that could either stifle or nurture creativity. For Layne, it did the latter. Even as a child, he exhibited an artistic temperament, drawing cartoons, immersing himself in music, and displaying an early fascination with performance. Friends and family later recalled that he had an almost preternatural ability to command attention when he sang, even in his youth. His voice, even then, carried a depth and resonance that seemed impossible for someone so young. Music became his refuge. By his early teens, he was obsessively listening to records by artists like Black Sabbath, Van Halen, and especially Kiss, whose theatricality and raw power left an indelible impression. He would spend hours in his room, headphones on, air drumming along to complex rhythms, dreaming of the day he might take the stage himself. His mother, recognizing his passion, bought him his first drum kit, a gift that would set him on a path toward musical expression, though not in the way either of them could have anticipated. But Layne wasn't just a music lover. He was a dreamer in the truest sense. He didn't merely want to be a musician. He wanted to mean something, to create art that resonated, that mattered. This wasn't the shallow ambition of fame-seeking. It was the yearning of an artist who felt things deeply and needed an outlet for that intensity. Even in high school, at Shorewood High, and later Shorecrest, he stood out, not just for his musical inclinations, but for his sensitivity, his sharp wit, and the quiet sadness that sometimes flickered behind his eyes. Yet dreams, as Layne would tragically come to learn, exact a price. The same sensitivity that made his voice so compelling also left him vulnerable to the darker currents of life. He struggled with feelings of alienation, a sense that he didn't quite fit in, a theme that would later permeate his lyrics. By his late teens, he had already experimented with drugs, a common but perilous rite of passage in the Pacific Northwest's burgeoning rock scene. What began as recreational use would in time become a defining and ultimately destructive force in his life. But in those early years, before the weight of addiction and fame, Layne Staley was still just a kid with a voice too big for his small-town existence, a voice that, unbeknownst to him, would one day help redefine the sound of an era. The road ahead would lead to unimaginable highs and devastating lows, but in Kirkland, in those formative years, the future was still an open question, a blank page waiting to be filled with screams and whispers, triumph and tragedy. This was the origin of Layne Staley, not the doomed legend, not the cautionary tale, but the dreamer who dared to believe his voice could echo beyond the confines of his quiet Washington town. And echo it would, far longer and far louder than even he could ever imagine. In the grand tapestry of rock history, few creative partnerships have been as serendipitous or as tragically consequential as the meeting between Layne Staley and Jerry Cantrell. Their union in the late 1980s would not only redefine the sound of heavy music, but would also set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to both unprecedented artistic achievement and profound personal tragedy. The story of how these two musicians found each other reads like something out of rock mythology, yet every detail is verifiable through interviews, archival records, and first-hand accounts from those who witnessed their early days. The year was 1987, and the Seattle music scene was undergoing a seismic shift. What had once been a relatively insular community of punk and metal bands was beginning to coalesce into something new and undefined. It was in this fermentative environment that Jerry Cantrell, a guitar player with a distinctive melodic sensibility and a deep knowledge of both metal and classic rock, found himself without a band after the dissolution of his previous group, Diamond Line. Meanwhile, Layne Staley, who had been drumming for the glam metal band Sleaze, later renamed Alice in Chains with an apostrophe, was looking to reinvent himself as a frontman. Their first encounter occurred at the now legendary Music Bank rehearsal space in Seattle, a converted warehouse that served as ground zero for the emerging grunge movement. Cantrell, who had heard Staley sing at a local show, was immediately struck by the raw power and emotional authenticity of his voice. In numerous interviews over the years, Cantrell would recall that moment with vivid clarity, how Staley's voice seemed to contain both angelic purity and demonic rage in equal measure, a quality that would become the band's sonic trademark. What made their connection so extraordinary wasn't simply complementary musical abilities, Cantrell's sophisticated guitar work and Staley's unparalleled vocal range, but something far more profound, a shared worldview, a mutual understanding of darkness, and an almost telepathic creative symbiosis. When they began writing together, the results were unlike anything else emerging from the Seattle scene at the time. Where other bands were exploring punk's simplicity or metal's aggression, Staley and Cantrell were crafting something more nuanced. Songs that balanced crushing heaviness with haunting melody. Lyrics that blended personal anguish with universal themes of addiction, depression, and existential dread. The naming of the band itself became a point of fascination for fans and critics alike. While the Alice in Chains moniker originated from Staley's previous glam band, reportedly inspired by a joke about Alice in Wonderland crossed with chains and bondage, it took on new, darker significance as the band's sound and lyrical themes developed. Many would later note the eerie presence of the name, as both Staley and original bassist Mike Starr would ultimately succumb to drug-related deaths, their lives literally bound in the chains of addiction. Music historians have often pointed to the specific alchemy of their early songwriting sessions as revolutionary. Tracks like We Die Young and Man in the Box demonstrated an unprecedented fusion of down-tuned, sludgy riffs with soaring vocal harmonies, a sound that would come to define not just Alice in Chains, but an entire generation of alternative metal. Producer Rick Parashar, who worked on their debut album, Facelift, recalled in interviews how the duo would spend hours perfecting their distinctive vocal harmonies, with Cantrell's cleaner tones providing the perfect counterpoint to Staley's grittier delivery. The professional partnership was mirrored by a deep personal bond. Bandmates and crew members from the era consistently described their relationship as brotherly, with Cantrell often serving as the more grounded counterpart to Staley's mercurial genius. This dynamic would prove both creatively fruitful and emotionally fraught as the band's success grew and Staley's personal demons became more pronounced. Music critics have since analyzed their partnership through various lenses, some emphasizing the yin-yang balance of their personalities, others focusing on how their collaborative process reflected broader tensions in alternative music between accessibility and authenticity. What remains undeniable is that when these two particular artists found each other at that specific moment in musical history, the result was something truly transformative, a sound that would influence countless bands while remaining utterly distinctive and impossible to replicate. The tragic irony, of course, is that the very qualities that made their music so powerful, the raw emotional honesty, the willingness to explore darkness without resolution, were rooted in personal struggles that would ultimately prove insurmountable. But in those early days, when they were just two unknown musicians in a Seattle rehearsal space, all that was still in the future. What mattered then was the music they were creating together, a sound that would change rock forever, born from one of the most fateful meetings in music history.
And I think Layne said, I love you all, I want to hug you all, but I'm not gonna. No, we won't. And then we walked off.
We were there for 7 hours hugging people after.
Yeah.
By the summer of 1992, Alice in Chains had achieved what most bands only dream of. They stood at the apex of the rock world. Their sophomore album, Dirt, catapulting them from promising Seattle act to global phenomenon. Released on September 29, 1992, through Columbia Records, the album would eventually be certified quadruple platinum, peaking at number 6 on the Billboard 200 chart. Yet this commercial and critical triumph masked a dark reality. Even as the world embraced their music, lead singer Layne Staley was beginning a personal unraveling that would ultimately prove irreversible. Dirt represented a quantum leap forward for the band musically and lyrically. Where their 1990 debut Facelift had established their signature sound, that unique alchemy of sludgy, detuned riffs and haunting vocal harmonies, Dirt plunged into much darker, thematic waters. The album's 13 tracks formed what many critics have since described as a concept album about addiction, though guitarist Jerry Cantrell has clarified in interviews that only about half the songs directly addressed substance abuse. What's undeniable is that the album's most harrowing tracks, Junkhead, Godsmack, Sick Man, and the title track, Dirt, constituted some of the most unflinchingly honest depictions of heroin addiction ever committed to tape in mainstream rock. The recording process itself, which took place between March and May 1992 at One-on-One Studios in Los Angeles and El Dorado Recording Studios in Burbank, revealed early warning signs. Engineers and producers working on the album have since recalled how Staley's behavior grew increasingly erratic during sessions. Dave Jordan, who produced both Facelift and Dirt, noted in later interviews that while Staley could deliver astonishing vocal performances, his reliability was becoming an issue. There were days when he wouldn't show up to the studio at all, or would arrive hours late, visibly impaired. What makes Dirt so remarkable, so tragic in retrospect, is how clearly it documents Staley's deteriorating condition. On Junkhead, with its chillingly matter-of-fact lyrics, "What's my drug of choice? Well, what have you got?" Staley doesn't glorify drug use so much as document its seductive logic and inevitable consequences. The song's bridge, where he snarls, "You can't understand a user's mind," serves both as a defense mechanism and a cry for help. Similarly, Godsmack, whose title plays on both the notion of divine punishment and the street name for heroin, features one of Staley's most unhinged vocal performances, his voice careening between whispered confession and full-throat roar. The album's commercial success created a surreal dichotomy. As Dirt climbed the charts and the band embarked on tours with Ozzy Osbourne and Metallica, playing to increasingly massive crowds, those closest to Staley noticed him withdrawing both physically and emotionally. Photographs from this period show a startling transformation. The once vibrant frontman appearing gaunt, his eyes increasingly hollow. Bandmates have since described how Staley would often isolate himself, skipping post-show gatherings to retreat to his hotel room. The music video for Wood, recorded for the single soundtrack but included on Dirt as a bonus track, offers perhaps the most poignant visual document of this period. Directed by Cameron Crowe, the video shows Staley performing in a Seattle club, his intense physicality and vocal power still evident, but his frame noticeably thinner than just 2 years prior during the Facelift era. The song itself, with its themes of guilt and mortality, reportedly written by Cantrell about Andrew Wood's overdose death, takes on additional layers of meaning when viewed through the lens of Staley's own struggles. Critically, Dirt was recognized as a masterpiece upon release. Rolling Stone praised its bone-crushing riffs and horroring lyrics, while Spin magazine called it the darkest, most compelling document of the Seattle scene. But this acclaim came with an uncomfortable subtext. Audiences were cheering for songs that were, in essence, suicide notes set to music. The band's performances on shows like Headbangers Ball and MTV's 120 Minutes brought these harrowing confessionals into living rooms across America, often with little awareness from viewers of how literally autobiographical they were. Looking back with 3 decades of hindsight, Dirt stands as one of rock's most disturbing success stories, an album that simultaneously represents creative zenith and personal nadir. Its songs became generational anthems precisely because of their unvarnished honesty, yet that same honesty revealed a frontman in crisis. The world may have been headbanging along to these tracks in 1992, but for those paying closest attention, the warning signs were all there in the music itself. As Staley himself would sing on Angry Chair, another Dirt track that reads like a cry for help in retrospect, loneliness is not a phase. The tragedy of Dirt isn't just that it captured Staley's descent, but that its very success may have accelerated it. The album's popularity kept the band on the road and in the spotlight at precisely the moment when Staley most needed to step away and seek help. Instead, he found himself trapped in a vicious cycle, using drugs to cope with the pressures of fame, while his worsening addiction only made those pressures more unbearable. By the time the Dirt tour cycle ended in 1993, the damage was done, and the Layne Staley who emerged was fundamentally changed, a shadow of the vibrant performer who had entered the studio just 18 months earlier. In this light, Dirt becomes more than just a landmark album. It's a time capsule of an artist teetering on the brink, creating his greatest work even as it consumed him. The warnings were there in the lyrics, in the interviews, in the increasingly gaunt figure on stage. But as with so many rock tragedies, the world wouldn't fully understand what it had witnessed until it was too late. The relationship between Layne Staley and Demry Parrott stands as one of rock history's most devastating love stories, a cautionary tale of codependent passion that ultimately accelerated both their downfalls. Far more than simply the Alice in Chains frontman's girlfriend, Parrott represented Staley's emotional counterpart in nearly every way. Their connection so intense that friends and bandmates often described them as two halves of the same fractured soul. Born Demry Laura Parrott on April 29, 1969, in Arlington, Washington, she met Staley in 1988 through Seattle's burgeoning music scene when she was just 19 years old. With her striking features, piercing blue eyes, raven hair, and a gothic punk aesthetic, Parrott immediately captivated the young singer. Early acquaintances described their initial attraction as volcanic, with the pair becoming virtually inseparable within weeks of meeting. Photographs from this period show them constantly wrapped around each other, their body language screaming intimacy, Staley's lanky frame enveloping Parrott's petite figure in a protective embrace that couldn't shield either from what was coming. Their relationship quickly developed what psychologists might classify as textbook codependency. Both struggled with substance abuse issues prior to meeting, but their union created a feedback loop of enabling behavior. Where Staley battled heroin addiction, Parrott wrestled with her own demons, including a heart condition that required valve replacement surgery in 1994, after which she reportedly became addicted to the painkillers prescribed during recovery. Bandmates recall how the couple would disappear for days on drug binges, with Cantrell once noting they fed off each other's darkness in ways that weren't healthy for either of them. Yet to dismiss their bond as merely destructive overlooks its profound depth. Interviews with those close to the pair reveal a relationship of startling emotional complexity. Parrott wasn't just Staley's lover. She served as his muse, appearing in the No Excuses video, his confessor, and at times, his caretaker during withdrawal periods. In turn, Staley reportedly financed multiple rehab attempts for Parrott, and according to friends, spoke of marrying her despite their chaotic dynamic. Their love letters, excerpts of which have surfaced over the years, reveal a tenderness starkly at odds with their public image. Staley's handwritten notes pleading with Parrott to stay clean, even as he struggled to do so himself. The fatal symmetry of their addictions reached its inevitable conclusion on October 29, 1996, when Parrott was found dead at age 27 from a heroin overdose, joining the infamous 27 Club just 2 years after Kurt Cobain's death. The circumstances were grimly predictable. Discovered unconscious in a friend's apartment after being released from the hospital following another overdose days earlier. For Staley, the loss proved catastrophic. Eyewitness accounts describe his behavior at her funeral as near catatonic. The 6'1" singer reportedly so emaciated he could barely stand without support. In the months following, his isolation became absolute. He stopped attending band rehearsals, abandoned work on new material, and withdrew into his Seattle condo, a space friends say he filled with Parrott's artwork and personal effects, creating a shrine to their doomed romance. Their artistic fallout was immediate and profound. Alice in Chains' 1996 MTV Unplugged performance, recorded just months after Parrott's death, features a visibly shattered Staley delivering what many consider his most emotionally raw vocal performances. His rendition of Down in a Hole, in particular, takes on horroring new dimensions when viewed through the lens of fresh grief, every cracked note dripping with palpable despair. In retrospect, Parrott's death didn't just deprive Staley of his great love, it severed his last meaningful connection to stability. Where previous attempts at sobriety had been motivated by concern for her well-being, he now faced the void without that anchor. His final years played out like a slow-motion suicide, increasingly reclusive, his physical and mental health deteriorating in parallel until his own overdose death in 2002 at age 34. As music historian Greg Prato observed, their relationship wasn't just rock star and girlfriend. It was a collision of twin souls who recognized their own brokenness in each other. And like two stars orbiting too close, they ultimately consumed each other in the process. The warning signs were all there, in their music, their art, their increasingly desperate attempts to get clean. But as with so many tragedies, recognition came only in hindsight. What remains is the art they created and the lives they touched, a bittersweet testament to love's capacity to both inspire and devastate in equal measure. The disintegration, Nirvana's abrupt end following Cobain's suicide, Soundgarden's very public tensions leading to their 1997 breakup, Alice and Get Born Again, and Died, that would later appear on the Music Bank box set. Engineer Toby Wright, who worked on these sessions, described the atmosphere as tense but loving, with band members walking on eggshells around Staley's fragile condition. These would prove to be the final studio recordings with the original lineup. What makes Alice in Chains' Dissolution unique is its lack of formal closure. While other bands announce splits through press releases or tell-all interviews, Alice in Chains simply stopped functioning as a working unit. The members remained in contact. Cantrell even contributed guitar to Staley's side project Mad Season during this period. But the machine that had produced 4 groundbreaking albums between 1990 to 1995 ground to a halt, not with a bang, but with a whimper. The music industry's confusion about the band's status became evident in 1999 when they were somehow nominated for and won a Grammy for Best Hard Rock Performance for Again, despite having been inactive for years. The award was accepted by Cantrell alone, a symbolic moment that underscored Staley's absence from public life. Behind the scenes, Staley's isolation became nearly total after 1998. Living in his Seattle condo, he reportedly spent days at a time watching cartoons, playing video games, and sinking deeper into addiction. Occasional visitors, including his mother, Nancy McCallum, and sister Liz, described a heartbreaking decline, with the once vibrant frontman now weighing under 100 pounds and rarely leaving his apartment. The band's 2001 attempt to record new material with Staley, intended for Cantrell's solo album, collapsed after just 2 days, with Cantrell later admitting they'd been in denial about how sick their friend truly was. This failed session would mark the last time all 4 original members were together in a studio. In retrospect, Alice in Chains didn't need a dramatic breakup because the tragedy unfolding was evident to anyone paying attention. The tours weren't canceled due to creative differences. They were canceled because watching Staley deteriorate on stage became unbearable. The music didn't stop because of infighting. It stopped because its primary creative force was locked in a private battle with addiction that left no room for artistry. The band's eventual reunion with William Duvall in 2006, 4 years after Staley's death, only highlighted how different their initial dissolution had been from typical rock breakups. There were no bitter lawsuits over royalties, no decades-long feuds between former members, just profound sadness over what addiction had stolen from them all. As Kenny later reflected, we didn't break up. We just lost Layne. Without him, there was no Alice in Chains. This quiet fading away stands as rock's most heartbreaking non-breakup. A band that didn't split so much as watch helplessly while their hearts stopped beating. The lack of drama didn't make it any less final. If anything, the absence of closure made the loss even more devastating for those involved. In the end, Alice in Chains' story wasn't about creative differences or industry pressures. It was about the human cost of addiction, played out in slow motion over nearly a decade of diminishing returns and fading hope. The world's final glimpses of Layne Staley in the mid to late 1990s present a haunting study of deterioration. A once vibrant artist, reduced performance at Kansas City's Memorial Hall on July 3rd provided an even starker portrait of decline. Bootleg recordings from the show capture Staley struggling through parts of the set, at one point telling the audience, "I'm sorry if I don't sound so good tonight." Bandmates would later reveal this was one of numerous shows where they considered stopping mid-performance due to concerns about Staley's condition. Staley's final televised appearance came not with Alice in Chains, but with his side project, Class of '99, a one-off supergroup covering Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall for the 1999 film The Faculty. The brief footage shows a shockingly gaunt Staley, his cheekbones protruding sharply, his movements slowed, yet still delivering a compelling vocal performance. Those who worked on the project recall he required frequent breaks and was noticeably frail between takes. What makes these final performances so tragic is the disconnect between audience perception and reality. Fans at these shows, many of whom were unaware of the severity of Staley's addiction, cheered wildly, interpreting his physical changes as part of the grunge aesthetic, rather than recognizing them as symptoms of advanced drug dependency. The mosh pits still swirled, the lighters still flickered during ballads, completely oblivious that they were witnessing not just a concert, but a prolonged goodbye. Industry insiders who worked with the band during this period paint a grim picture behind the scenes. Tour managers recount having to check on Staley hourly before shows, unsure if he'd be able to perform. Sound engineers developed techniques to mask his occasional vocal struggles in live mixes. Even the band's famous decision to sit during the unplugged performance, initially seen as an artistic choice, was reportedly partly necessitated by Staley's inability to stand for prolonged periods. In retrospect, the most heartbreaking aspect of Staley's final performances wasn't what was lost, it's what remained. Even in his diminished state, his vocal prowess and emotional delivery could still electrify audiences. This duality, the coexistence of staggering talent and physical ruin, is what makes these last appearances so difficult to watch today. We're not just seeing a great performer, we're seeing a great performer disappearing before our eyes. The cruel irony is that these farewells weren't recognized as such until years later. When Alice in Chains canceled their 1997 tour dates, fans assumed it was a temporary hiatus. When no new albums emerged, they blamed record label disputes. Even when Staley completely vanished from public view after 1999, when Alice in Chains canceled their 1997 tour dates, fans assumed it was a temporary hiatus. When no new albums emerged, they blamed record label disputes. Even when Staley completely vanished from public view after 1999, rumors persisted about secret comebacks and new projects. The truth? That they'd already seen the last of Layne Staley, that the man on those final stages was just a ghost of his former self, was too painful to accept, until his death in 2002 made it undeniable. These final performances now stand as both tribute and cautionary tale, a reminder of extraordinary talent and the awful price it sometimes exacts. The audiences that cheered those shows weren't just celebrating music, they were, without knowing it, bearing witness to one of rock's slowest, most public declines. A farewell stretched over years, punctuated by standing ovations, and ending in silent tragedy. During the last 6 years of his life, Layne Staley became a recluse in his Seattle condominium, existing in near total isolation as his health deteriorated from long-term drug addiction. Following Alice in Chains' final performances in 1996, the singer withdrew from public life entirely, rarely leaving his University District apartment except for occasional late-night trips to nearby convenience stores. Neighbors and the few friends who maintained contact described an increasingly grim existence. Staley's daily routine reportedly consisted of watching cartoons, playing video games, and sustaining himself on a diet of Pepsi and candy. His physical condition declined alarmingly. At 6'1", his weight dropped to approximately 86 pounds, 39 kilograms, according to autopsy reports. The once vibrant front man communicated primarily through handwritten notes slipped under his door, even to his close friends and family. Despite interventions from his mother, Nancy McCallum, and bandmate Jerry Cantrell, Staley refused rehabilitation attempts. His Seattle residence became a sort of self-imposed prison, with security cameras installed to monitor visitors. The music world continued moving forward with new trends and artists, while Staley remained trapped in addiction's grip. His final album sales statements and royalty checks going largely unnoticed as he awaited the inevitable conclusion to his struggle. On April 19, 2002, Seattle police conducted a welfare check at Layne Staley's University District condominium after concerned friends and family reported not hearing from him for 2 weeks. Forced to break down the door, officers discovered the Alice in Chains frontman deceased in his home. The King County medical examiner would later determine Staley had died on April 5th, exactly 8 years after Nirvana's Kurt Cobain's death from a combined heroin and cocaine overdose. The timeline revealed a haunting parallel. Staley's body had remained undiscovered for nearly 2 weeks, while unopened mail piled up and unanswered phone calls accumulated. Security camera footage showed no activity at his residence during this period. Toxicology reports indicated a massive speedball dose, the same lethal combination that had claimed fellow Seattle musician John Baker Saunders of Mad Season 3 years earlier. At the time of death, the 34-year-old singer weighed just 86 pounds, his physical deterioration reflecting years of severe addiction. The discovery came just weeks before Alice in Chains was scheduled to be honored with a Founding Fathers Award at Seattle's annual Music Awards, adding tragic irony to his passing. Staley's death certificate listed the official cause as acute intoxication from the polydrug combination.
The lead singer of the rock band Alice in Chains has been found dead in his Seattle home.
By the time the world found out, Layne had been dead for 2 weeks. The media called it a tragedy, but those who knew him, they called it inevitability.
Police then discovered a body, later identified as Staley, that had been deceased for at least a few days, surrounded by intravenous drug paraphernalia.
Layne didn't just sing, he bled into the microphone. And today, his voice echoes in every artist who dares to bear their song. Layne Staley is gone, but his voice, his pain, his truth, they're still here. And they always will be.
Are you happy?
I was getting to that, yep. Dang it, I am. I think I'm gonna cry.